All right, we are going to tear into a 1985 Virago. We're going to pull the clutch assembly apart here. We've got Allen bolts all the way around this cover here. They're 5mm Allens, and we've got most of them loosened up here. So we will grab an impact and take all these off here. Oil filter is under this cover here. We've got several different braces that hold wires and vent tubes down below this cover. So you want to make sure that those get put back in so you don't have bare wires, or so you don't have wires rubbing against the frame. All right, we got all those out there. We're going to just pull them out now because otherwise they're all going to fall out. All right, and that oil filter cover kind of has a spot here that you can get a screwdriver in behind to pry on it. You want to make sure you don't get into that gasket area. And same way with the clutch cover, you want to make sure you don't break those posts off there. Just be really careful where you're prying on. Ideally, you don't want to pry on this stuff at all, but all right, oil filter cover is off there, kind of slides down in there. You can take your finger there and just grab a hold of it. Always replace that filter. We always replace them when we're changing oil. Now we're going to grab a hammer here. Be really careful doing this, but a lot of times this is what you got to do to break that gasket seal. You can hear a change of sound when that gasket seal is loosened and kind of broke free. Obviously, going back together, you want to replace this gasket as well, especially if it's taken this much work to pull this off. Looks like about 3 places here that you can use to get a pry bar in behind there and pry up on without damaging that gasket area. There is your clutch cover, and it's off. Then we've got your clutch pack assembly there. I'll show you when we flip this motor over, your clutch rod that pushes against there, and it keeps wanting to slide out the other side. So 10mm, loosen these. These are spring loaded here. Now then what I do is take, sometimes you gotta get a screwdriver, kind of lift it off of there. You shouldn't have to, but pull that off. This roller bearing washer sits on top of there. And go ahead and pull that out. Take a screwdriver, then flatten this holder. There should be at least one of these holders that are holding this nut into place. I like to take my finger and hold on the post here so it doesn't spin this. Loosen that up. It doesn't take very much. That holder does the work of make sure that clutch doesn't loosen up. So there's a bolt there. And then what I do, put this back on. Make sure it seats all the way down. Put the springs back on there. And tighten these down. Just snug them down. Just enough so they don't fall out. And then a couple of them I put tension on, because what you can do now is take and pull this clutch pack off. And that basket will stay there. So you can inspect that basket, replace any parts that need to on that clutch, then you can just pull that off when you're ready to. That is your clutch basket there. A lot of times these will groove in here with a lot of miles. If that's happening, now those plates will catch on there and cause issues. So that's why that clutch basket will need replaced from time to time. Same thing, we've got a holder on this one. Take a screwdriver, flatten it down. If you have to keep bending over the same spot when we're going back together on these keepers, you want to make sure that that gets replaced. Trying to hold this from spinning. Alright, spin that off. That's just regular threads on there. And then we won't be able to remove this until we pull this 10mm holder here. And this is the same thing as we did on the front, or the rear. This is the front. Pull this little holder out here. This pin is going to be able to be removed. And then this sprocket will come out of there. And this is for the front cylinder. And that chain, it just fell out of there, but that chain rolls on that gear that we just removed. And then this other guide here, this has to be removed. It's got a lock nut on it. So sometimes you've got to loosen that lock nut first, but then just pull this out. This pin, or this bolt, just sits right down into that groove there on that tensioner. We have got your starter line that comes in here, your wire. Remove that. And we've got a sensor down here that we'll remove at the same time, and it's got a cover over top of it. It's got an Allen cover, so we'll remove this. You probably can't see that very well, but just two Allens coming up from the bottom of that crankcase. There's the cover there, and then I'll go ahead and take this sensor out. Alright, that sensor's out there. That's what that one looks like from the bottom. Now this gear we should be able to pull off. Now this is spring loaded just like the other side was. We had a keeper that just fell down there. Sits in that groove there on the crank. But this is spring loaded. If we were to pull this out, we'd have springs go everywhere, just like we did behind that flywheel. So dowel pins, make sure those go back in there when you're putting the motor back together. And go ahead and pull that one. 12mm, that just holds that clip on there, or that hose holder. And we'll see if there's any bolts here that need to be removed to split that case. I'm not seeing any. We will remove this down here that holds that pin in. I'm going to use an impact driver here. That does a good job of getting Phillips screws out. I'm not sure at this time if we pull this out. It'll fall out if we don't. All right, we'll flip this motor over, pull that transfer gear out of there, that bevel gear, that output, and we'll split this case here. Here is, oh, that's not gonna come out yet. We've got a handful of Allens we need to remove, and it's gonna be a bit of a challenge for me to do those while I'm showing you, so I'm just gonna loose them and then I'll show you where they are when I'm pulling them out. These are a big one up top here. I think we've got 2 big ones on here is all we have. So right by this front cylinder. Oh, we've got one by the back cylinder as well. This is an 8mm Allen. I think it's about the only place on here. This one's going to be a challenge because of where it's at. So I'm going to use times when I can't get them apart like that, I'll grab a wrench. Just gives me a little bit of a bigger area to grab. You want to make sure it's in there all the way when you're doing this. Alright, got that one loosened up. So all 3 of those are loosened now. And then we've got a handful of 6mm, 5 and 6, well, maybe just 5mm Allens all around this crankcase here. This rod will go out the other side now. It's where that clutch, when I showed you how to do that clutch adjustment on the other video, and then when we pulled that clutch pack apart, this shaft here hits against this. Oh, that wasn't supposed to happen. Hits against that. We've got a washer that will drop down in that crankcase, but okay, these 3 big ones are out. Now it's hide and seek for the other whole bunch of them. You can't get them on there all the way. You'll make sure you tap them in because you want to make sure they're seated really well before you break them loose. Keep in mind we've got to pull all those, or remove all those springs and pins that we dropped in there behind that flywheel gear. So those will be on in the bottom end. Shift drum has to be lined up like I showed you on that first video. so that we're not breaking those parts when we pull it out. That bearing will come with it. I'm going to, well, I'll keep going here. We'll go ahead and before we split this motor here, we'll remove this yoke, this output gear. Let me get a handful of these loosened first. This one's got debris down in there. If it does have anything that's going to keep you from seating all the way, you want to make sure and clean that out. Like maybe one more on this side, and then we'll go back to the other side. All right, I'm gonna tip this motor up now and get some of these bottom ones. Should have been counting these so you know how many to find. All right, looks like we're down to our last couple here. And we'll pull this rear output shaft. Be a lot easier to do it now while this motor kind of holds itself up. And if you do it later, a lot of times your motor wants to flip-flop back and forth, and you don't want to keep on pounding on a motor that's sliding back and forth on the workbench. All right, not sure if we got them all out yet. Oh, we got a couple inside here. We've got one down in there by where the oil pump was. That might be a little bit of a challenge. All right, we're able to get that one off. Okay, we'll see if we got them all. Kind of look over quick, see if we have all those. Around the outside, we've got a sensor on the bottom here. Oops. $14mm is a gear position sensor, a neutral sensor possibly. And then one over here as well. I'm guessing that's oil or temperature. I'd have to look for sure, but now it looks like we got all the crankcase bolts out of there. Just looking on this side, see if we missed any. We may have still missed some, but what we're going to do now is pull this drive shaft, this yoke assembly on this Virago 700. Now to do that, what I do is take 2 screwdrivers about the same height. Well, we'll just try it with one to start because I can't find my 2 that match. Yeah, we're going to find those. Any 2 screwdrivers that are the exact same size will work. Alright, I'm not seeing my other one. Interesting. Okay. Well, we got to figure out a different way of doing this then. So if you have this clip, if you're trying to get these clips out, what I generally do is take 2 screwdrivers that are the same size and tap on them both at the same time, trying to get these clips out. And if you can get them the exact same size and hit them, if you get them the exact same size and hit them, then they don't go flying all over the place because you're able to kind of know how hard to hit. But that one we're able to keep. So the two yokes that are, or the yokes that's connected to the motor is what we're taking apart. Alright, we got them both out. We'll have to go search for those now, but just for time's sake, now you take and you pound down on the caps that you took the pins out. So both of these here, you take and tap down on this right here. And that drops the pin out the bottom, or the cap out the bottom, and then you turn it, do the exact same thing. That saves your bearings, that saves your cap. And you're all set there. That's how you remove the U-joint in the yoke set on a Virago 700. Now you just take and undo that cap there. 19 millimeter. And that yoke will just pop right off of there. It's got a an O-ring behind there that's going to kind of hold us up. Would be my guess is why it's not coming out. Yep, it's got a large O-ring there that we could grab a pick and pull that out, but I don't really want to damage that O-ring. If you're rebuilding this assembly, you'd want to order another O-ring. You could take it, just pull it out. Might have to do that though. Pretty good size O-ring that you won't slide over the top of it, which is what happens a lot of times when you're trying to get past an O-ring. Shouldn't be this difficult. All right, and then this will just pop right off there. Now to get these off, 12 millimeter socket, remove these three, and this aluminum cap will just pop right off of there. You want to be careful, you don't want to take a hammer and slam on this. This is aluminum and it is extremely susceptible to breaking. There we go, just pop it right off there. It's sealed with an O-ring, which is what was holding us on there. So now all that banging around there, we were able to, that case just kind of opened itself up there. Now what I like to do is set this motor down on a side that hopefully all those gears will stay in. I need to keep an eye on this gear shifter as well, so I'm going to set it down this way and see if we can split the case the rest of the way. Just looking for any extra bolts that's going to hold us up. There's a couple spots on here, just like there was on the covers there, that give us room to get in there with something to pry. You don't want to get too deep and get into those cases, but they make a lip there large enough for you to be able to get a screwdriver or a pry bar in to lift up on it. So you can see this one here, this is a good example. You're able just to get in here, kind of pry on it without damaging that gasket area. And that's with that rubber mallet. It's going to be, oh, I guess not. So that lifts off there. Crankshaft stayed on this side, but the rest of the gears stayed on this side. You've got your output shaft here. We've got your shift drum here. This rod that we pulled out here before we split this case actually went through all your shift forks, and you wouldn't have had to pull that out. I just wasn't sure if that was going to hold us up anywhere. Slide this over here, and if you check out my V-Star 1100 video, it shows you how to pull this gear here, your output gear, and I won't go through all those steps again. That video explains it really well, and it's the exact same setup on that V-Star 1100. So search my videos, I'll put a link to it, and you'll be able to see how to pull this output shaft, this transfer gear, and then they work together. And you want to replace them together, but there's a special way of getting those apart there. The rest of these gears, they just kind of pull out carefully. I like to try to keep them together. So obviously pulled that shaft out of there, so these forks aren't going to be together. They are labeled 1, 2, and 3, so that's pretty easy to figure out. You got your shift drum here, and then now these transmission gears will be able to slide right out of there. So that is splitting the case on a Virago 700.